Peter offered he offered to take some questions. He has gone over time. He promised to be.
Speaking of delay.
How about we delay, if there are some questions for Peter, let's hear some.
Or comments.
Yes.
Well, what a wonderful beginning. I'm Chairperson, Center for Refugee Studies at York. I have a question about terminology and about your use of terminology.
You're not the first.
I know. So in the second part of the presentation, at one point you shifted, or you said you were shifting from, I think, regular to forced migration. And then for the next few minutes, in the last, I guess, 10 minutes of your presentation, sometimes you used the term migration, sometimes forced migration, and sometimes you talked about what might be forcing the migration. And at times, though, you filled in your PowerPoint slide with the term forced where it wasn't up there. And I was just interested to see your grappling with the use of the term forced before migration. At one point you had the slide, massive increases for aid to in-transit migrants, but you read it as in-transit forced migrants. So I was just curious how you thought we as researchers might approach this use of the word forced before migrants. Is it a term that we should put in quotes, or is it a term that we should leave out altogether?
Well, Peter, before you take Peter, we have two questions, just so we get other voices in and give you the opportunity to answer them all together. Is there anybody else who wants to hear it? Yes.
My name is still Adeni Tamo from Oslo, York University. I'm just wondering if you could clarify what you're trying to say about federal court seeking leave. Do you say it's no more going to the trial division, or it's still the process, or are you talking about federal court of appeal? So I just need a clarification.
Okay.
If things has changed, when it changed, because I'm doing something like that.
We take a third. Okay, let's go with two then.
Well, in regard to I think that's a correct observation, and I think it's an excellent question, and I have grappled with it. I mean, I come from a world where it's primarily concerned, first of all, about refugees, where there's a very, very clear distinction between those who have a fear of persecution and all the others. Well, that's old thinking that's probably at least 10 years out of date, and in exactly the same way, even in preparing this talk, it occurred to me this notion of forced migration as opposed to voluntary migration. All of those categories are breaking down, and so that's my observation. That's why when I talk about mixed motivation, is this person a refugee or not? But are they a forced migrant? Well, sometimes they didn't start out as a forced migrant, but at some point may have become a forced migrant. One of the things we know with trafficking is very often that people start in one position, and we've got this concept of stranded migrants, which there's more attention to. So I think forced migration is a term of art, and it's in the title of your organization, so I don't think we should abandon it right away. That's an awkward enough acronym without having quotation marks in the middle of it. That'd be horrible. But I think you're correct that I think I played pretty fast and loose with the terminology. But I think we have to be aware of the concept. And more what we're really talking about is this tremendous, and in some sense, if we look at that wave, maybe we're just all kidding ourselves. We can track it, we can map it, we can try and be smart about it, but that wave is happening anyway. If I can use one analogy, water analogy used by my friend and colleague Michael Dawson, he was saying years ago about the Safe Third Country Agreement when it just came in. He said, you watch, it'll have an effect for 2 or 3 years. But refugees, and you can apply this to migrants because you're talking about that driving desperation, he said they're like water. They'll find ways around. And there's this kind of contest right now where particularly the industrialized companies just raise the barriers more, and they continually find their way around. You see Canada went down for 5 years, and now the claim flow is going up, and people find their ways into the country, and then they claim. So that will always go on. So, but it's a very important point, and I'm glad you made it. In regard to the federal court, perhaps I spoke too quickly because I was talking about two different things. The federal court used to have two divisions, the appeal division and the federal court trial division. Well, in about 2000 or 2001, they changed the Federal Court Act, so there's two courts. The federal court, which used to be the old trial division, and then there's the federal court of appeal. The point I was making in the way in which it works, if you're a refused refugee claimant, you can make an application for leave to judicial review to the federal court, which was the old trial division. That's the one that grants between 10 and 14% leave, actually get the opportunity to argue judicial review. Doesn't mean that you win the judicial review, but you get the opportunity to argue it. Between 25 and 40% actually are successful in the judicial review, which is another point. Once you get by that leave stage, that triage, your possibilities go up. So for me, my concern is that triage level there. We don't know who's being filtered out there, and there are no reasons telling us what it is. And we just have a new study coming out saying there's rapid variance between the individual judges. Well, that's what you call a lottery. You don't call it a judicial system, and that's the essential point. Does that clarify? Anything else? One more. I'm on a roll.
Well, I think
yes, there we go.
You said something about Manitoba doing something good.
Yes.
That all other jurisdictions should follow. But you didn't really elaborate on what it means that Manitoba is doing.
That's because I was running overtime. And this is in regard to, they're doing two things that I think are great. One is in regard to, and this is an area that it's not my area, so I don't understand particularly well, but in regard to migrant labor, they've got employment standards in place. They've got a surveillance program in place. They've got a reporting program in place, and they often hold the employer accountable rather than the migrant who's in the vulnerable position. And they're also very tough on recruiting companies. There's a whole range of things they do. They're not supposed to, for example, the Living Caregiver Program, they're not supposed to charge recruiting fees, training fees, but they call them different names and they deduct from the paycheck. So Manitoba's been very good at regulating that and the regime they have in place. The other thing they've done, which I think is great, and this is talking about migration and it's not irregular migration. I want you to note that this is regular migration, not irregular migration. They have had a program with the Philippines for many, many years in regard to Filipino nurses. And what they do is, so Filipino nurses come under work authorizations. They stay as labor and then eventually can apply under the their permanent residency program within the province to become permanent residents. But it's been going on so long, they don't bring them individually, they bring them in groups. Now the people running the program are primarily or former Filipino nurses, so they know what their needs are. It's a very well-established program, so a lot of the settlement problems are smoothed out. The one thing, as far as I know, they don't do it, and this goes back to this notion of interregulation between countries. What they don't do, as far as I know, and someone can correct me on this, is they don't provide funding to nursing colleges in the Philippines. Now, many nations in this situation, they like the remittances. Remittances are a significant part of the economy of the Philippines and El Salvador, but it seems to me you could even be more structured in providing support, so you're also paying for money for Filipino nurses that don't come to Canada, but actually remain in the country. But it seems to me those are some of the really